Hi again, welcome back everyone. I hope you've had a chance to visit the partner lounges and to go on a virtual visit or two. It's now time for session 3, Building a Better Life, and I'll be chairing this one. We've heard about the grand challenges, how research and technology might address them. We've heard quite a bit on how to keep an eye on the future, on the emergent technologies that are going to address those challenges, how to think about the future that we want. This session is about where the rubber meets the road. Once the transformative technologies are identified, how to get them into practice, how to make sure they're regulated but not too regulated, how to ensure those technologies are equitably shared with the public, trusted by the public, actually used by the public. The structure of the session is that each panelist will give a 15-minute talk, which will then be followed by 5 minutes of questions. And then we'll sit down and have something of a roundtable chat. So during all those question sessions, at the end of each talk and then at the end of all the talks, please do keep the questions coming. This will be better for all involved, and especially for me as session chair if it's a bit of a dialogue. So keep questions coming. Also, we again have an audience poll question. So if you go up to next to the chat, there is the poll part. The question here is, what is the most significant impediment to the positive societal impacts of emerging breakthrough technologies? Is it about regulation? Is it about inclusivity? Is it about skepticism and all the things that come with that? Or is it the inertia of the status quo? So have a vote, and that will close, and we'll see the outcome after the talks. So in this session, we'll be hearing from Haley Scottman, professor at Tampere University, Finland, Pekka Lundmark, president and chief executive of Nokia, famously Finnish, and Jamie Pike of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Lausanne. First up, though, is Peter Vanacker, chief executive of Neste Corporation in Finland, on the matter of the circular economy. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jason, and everybody also very pleased to be here. What I want to talk about today is circular bioeconomy, and I have a couple of teases, for you. So thanks for inviting me today. I believe this forum is a unique platform for exchanging ideas on how innovation and breakthrough technologies are changing the world and the societies we live in. Neste is a company that is creating solutions for combating climate change and accelerating a shift to a circular economy. And we heard already today people talking about the importance of the circular economy. We at Neste, we refine waste, residues, and innovative raw materials into renewable fuels, but also into a sustainable feedstock for plastics and chemicals. And therefore, the circular economy is at the core of our business. Now, what is circular economy? And there are hundreds of different definitions. But I believe it does not need to be something that is difficult. For me, it's quite simple. The concept is, instead of throwing something away, you reuse it. And there are endless opportunities around the circular economy. These can strengthen industry competitiveness in the long term, as well as support creating a healthier planet for our children. And that is also our company purpose at Neste. I like to talk about the circular bioeconomy. And this combines the concept of circular economy to that of bioeconomy, which is based on the sustainable use of renewable resources, wastes and residues. In addition, the products that we are producing, they should be recyclable. So my presentation will introduce these 3 key theses around the circular bioeconomy. First, in order to future-proof the industry, a circular bioeconomy is not an option, it is a must. Secondly, there are already available solutions, so let's put them immediately into action. And thirdly, the circular bioeconomy is a business opportunity, and that business opportunity is best grasped together with partners. Let's get started with the first thesis. This statement has everything to do with 2 major global challenges: the climate crisis and the global waste plastic challenge. The climate crisis is so enormous that it will not be tackled with one single solution. we will need to reduce emissions in all sectors, in land, in the air, on the sea, but we also must reduce the environmental impact of different end products and develop new means to ensure that waste plastic is seen as a valuable material and that it remains in circulation. I'll give you an example. The Plastics Europe organization has pointed out that altogether 29 million tons of post-consumer plastic waste was collected in 2018 for treatment in Europe. Imagine, only 1/3 of this was directed to recycling, and even less actually has been recycled. The remaining 2/3 was lost for the circular economy, either directed to energy recovery or, even worse, buried in landfills. At the same time, plastic demand is expected to grow at least fourfold by 2050. Now, what brings us hope is the fact that the polymers and chemicals industry is already reacting to the pressure. I have personally spent 30 years in the industry, and I have never seen this level of excitement, or on the other hand, the pressure to make the industry more sustainable. And pressure to change comes from the consumer side. And that is reflected by big brands that are making ambitious sustainability commitments. It also comes from legislators, which are developing the necessary tools to both push and pull the industry towards a more sustainable future. I believe that in order to future-proof our companies and industries, to truly live up to the expectations of our stakeholders, transformation towards a greater circularity is not an option. It is a must, and it is also the license to operate in the future. We at Neste have a bold ambition to become a global leader in renewable and circular solutions. We are already the world's leading producer of renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel made out of waste and residues. In the field of polymers and chemicals, we're also placing focus on two fronts. The first one is circularity. So together with several plastics value chain partners, we're developing technologies and capacity to chemically recycle plastic waste that is not recycled today. And our aim is to process over 1 million tons of waste plastic annually from 2030 onwards. We're progressing well towards this target. And last fall, we processed 400 tons of plastic waste into high-quality recycled feedstock, and that was at an industrial scale. The other keyword is renewable. So producing renewable drop-in feedstock to replace virgin fossil feedstock. So here we're talking about waste and residues, recycling that waste instead of using the virgin fossil feedstock like products coming from crude oil. And that can be done to produce a big variety of plastics and chemicals. And together with our partners, we did the first ever commercial scale production of bio-based plastics from renewable raw materials, and that was already in 2019. And since then, we have announced more and more partnerships. So my second thesis is there are already available solutions. We just need to put them into action. We're past the point where only target setting is sufficient. We must start making more sustainable choices today, and those solutions are, as said, already available. What was futuristic a decade ago is possible already today. However, all these new solutions require major investments, and investments need a predictable business environment and also policies that encourage innovation. Because as we know, these innovation cycles, they take years, if not decades, to become a reality. Progressive, technologically forward-thinking and consistent policy framework can encourage all the industry players to innovate and maximize value from existing resources. This is essential for accelerating the shift towards a circular economy. and for economic growth and recovery in general. All this is, of course, not possible without cooperation. And tackling the climate crisis or the global waste plastic challenge calls for innovation, it calls for commitment, and most of all, partnerships. Closing the circularity loop requires a lot of action and the support of the entire value chain. And when working together, forerunner companies can truly make a positive impact, even within the most complex value chains. So my third thesis is therefore that the circular bioeconomy is a business opportunity, and that business opportunity is best grasped together with partners. I believe that circularity should not be seen only as something you have to embrace, but also as a business opportunity. And the most sustainable companies in the world are actually the most successful and resilient in many aspects. There are also those companies that believe in the power of cooperation. So sustainability and circularity should be seen as value drivers. These hold value in themselves. Companies should be sustainable and operate sustainably, not because it is mandated by the law or expected by others, but because it is really the only way to run successful businesses in the long term. It's also the best approach not only for the company itself, but for the people, for the society, and for the economic, not to mention also for the entire planet. Not only to get us through this pandemic, but also to tackle the climate crisis and the global waste plastic challenge in the longer term. So therefore, dear audience and fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a circular bioeconomy is a must and an opportunity. But most of all, it is already possible today. And I'm looking forward to exchanging ideas with you. Thank you very much.
Right. Peter, thank you very much indeed. My first question, if I may, if I can take moderator's prerogative here and ask the first question. This is a problem that is very different in different jurisdictions, right? There are a lot of different players in a lot of different places. Classically, a first mile problem with recycling more generally. I mean, why do you think that that can be solved with all the incumbent companies along the way who would have to participate in this? As you say, it's best done with partners. I might say it can only be done with all those partners.
Yeah, I agree, Jason. I mean, it can only be done, with the partners because one company alone cannot do this. Yeah, and it goes, from waste collection companies on one hand side, but it goes all the way up to the brand owner. So the big brands like Unilever, P&G, Nestle, and so on. What I would say is that there is a lot of traction already because, if you look at the younger generations, and I see it in my kids, they are really critical. If they buy their food, they want to make sure it's sustainably produced, but also they look at the packaging of the food. And they also look, where is the origin? Has it been recycled? Is there a possibility to recycle it as well? So I think, that younger generation will also increase, the push. But there is an important point that you also indirectly, touch upon in your question, and that is the point of regulation. Yeah. So in order to really get this started, to really accelerate, we do believe, of course, that there is a need for a consistent regulation, but not over-regulate. That's important.
Right. And you mentioned that this is a notion in part of culture. They say that we have to do this. This is a must-do, but there's been a must-do, for example, with respect to climate. There's been increasingly a must-do about workplace diversity and so on. That has all proved extremely slow and difficult to regulate. Do you think this problem specifically is any easier, is any more tractable because of its nature?
Well, I believe it is already happening in several jurisdictions. We heard also Jyrki Katainen speak this morning, and I remember also when I had meetings with him in the European Commission when he was in Brussels, where we talked about the circularity and chemical recycling and so on. And as of today, in Europe, there is already a plastic tax that has been imposed of 80 cents a kilo since the beginning of the year for non-recycled plastic. So I'm a stubborn optimist, I would say. Yeah, I see that these things are really put into motion, and in addition to that, it's not a conflict to the climate crisis, because of course, if you need to take, virgin crude oil raw materials to produce, chemicals and plastics, it also is directly linked, to climate change. So that means that, for example, on European level, the Fit for 55 package, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% until 2030, is also in really encouraging companies to move into this direction along the value chain. So I'm quite positive that we are moving in the right direction.
And what about the scope of how much that might help? Someone in the chat has asked about how much that will shift the actual need for virgin feedstocks. Do you have a sense for that, and how universal that fraction is?
Yeah, if I put a couple of numbers, the pre-pandemic consumption of plastics in Europe, 55 million tons, approximately 15% of that has been already recycled through mechanical recycling, but the rest has not. So is a very large, opportunity that you see here that can also be recycled. Then not at the detriment of mechanical recycling, but on top of mechanical recycling to that chemical recycling way. Having said that, I see that if you just look at that opportunity, 15%, 15 years ago, there was no recycling in a mechanical recycling way, and now it's 15%. So if we think, 10, 15 years ahead of us, and there would be 15% of the other plastics that are being recycled, we're talking about a huge, business opportunity, but also a big change in how we deal, for example, with chemicals and plastics.
Right, and you say that this is already going on in some jurisdictions, notably Finland and by Neste and so on. How about some takeaway lessons? What is specific about the Finnish market and the way things have been regulated and set up that could serve as lessons for others?
Yeah, first and all, you need to build up these partnerships. Yeah, and that takes, of course, quite some time. In addition to that, there is still quite a lot of innovation that is needed in cooperation. And here, VTT is also on the forefront, working together with us and other partners. So you really need to have that that freedom of innovation to find the best way in how to perform that chemical recycling. So when I say, yes, the solution is here today and has been trialed and in the meantime has been sold in the marketplace, it does not mean that innovation stops because there isn't a solution already available today. So there will have to be continuous innovation, definitely as far as I can look forward 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us, to make that renewable and circular economy really a reality, but also economically that attractive that eventually over time you don't need to have regulation anymore as we need it today.
Right. Always the hope about regulation is that it goes away. Peter, thank you very much. I'd ask you to stick around for the roundtable session to come. But for now, let's move over to speak to Heli Scottman of Tampere University. Heli, please join me on the stage.
Thank you. It is my true pleasure to be here today and share the vision of human living spare parts. As an opening for our discussion, I will describe the concept of tissue engineering of human spare parts and the future perspectives of this revolutionary field of regenerative medicine. Let's start from future. Let's consider that it's year 2040, so around 20 years from now. There is a new pandemic arising. Yes, this time with new virus causing a significant kidney failure for those infected. Vaccinations are under development, and the development is fast, as we have learned something during the COVID-19 pandemic. You probably still remember that time. But unfortunately, the vaccinations don't help those infected already, and for them, only treatment would be a new functional kidney transplant. But luckily, there has been a long-term investments for basic and translational research in tissue engineering, and that's why doctors have solutions for this. and we can maybe escape from emerging crises globally. With the technology, doctors can actually, just by blood sampling, tissue typing, and CT scanning images of patient's own kidney, order a new kidney transplant for the patient. And that would be ready in few months from order. At that time, patient can actually survive with help of dialysis treatment. Wouldn't that be great? Yes, I think so. But unfortunately, we are not there yet. Even today in Europe, 18 patients die every day while waiting for transplant. 6,000 patients waiting the transplant die each year. Last year, in Europe alone, 150,000 patients were listed on waiting lists. And this is just situation in Europe. Globally, the situation is much worse. And this is not caused by any pandemic. This is a chronic existing shortage of human tissues and cells. So, how could we use human pluripotent stem cells and other tools for tissue engineering? What are the building blocks for human spare parts? First, what we need is cells. Cells can be taken from patient or from donor. Those can be expanded and then transplanted back. For example, human stem cells are a very good source of different kind of tissue-specific cells. In human body, in several tissues, we have this kind of tissue-specific stem cells. We call them adult stem cells. And those renew constantly our tissues. As an example, our skin is renewed in every 2 weeks, our bones in every 10 years. But unfortunately, in many of our tissues and organs, we don't have these stem cells. And that's why other cell sources are needed. For there, human pluripotent stem cells, including embryonic and induced pluripotent stem cells, could offer a great option, because these are the stem cells which have the capability to differentiate towards hundreds of different cell types found in human body. The discovery made by Dr. Yamanaka in 2007 with human cells, the method to produce induced pluripotent stem cells just from normal tissue cell, like a skin cell or blood cell, this opens a revolutionary new tool for regenerative medicine. And from this innovation, he received the Millennium Technology Prize in 2012. With this technology, it would be possible to make patients' own induced pluripotent stem cells, iPS cells we call them, and then use those to produce cells what the patient needs. But globally, there are actions ongoing that there will be stem cell banks available, which could be offer more safe and more cost-effective way to produce and provide these cells for future therapies. In addition to cells, we need biomaterials. Biomaterials can be synthetic or natural. They are this kind of structural things which can support the development of the tissue or organ which cells are producing. Biomaterials are used a lot in different kind of medical applications already. Traditional example is, for example, artificial hip joints, which many of us will get we get older. And there are many methods to decorate these biomaterials and make them more functional. As one example is drug release properties, which can even further enhance the tissue regeneration. And for this innovation, Dr. Langer received the Millennium Technology Prize in 2008. And I forgot to mention that actually Shinya Yamanaka received also the Nobel Prize soon after he received the Millennium Technology Prize. So with this, then additionally, thirdly, we need induced pluripotent stem cells and induced factors combined with them. These induced factors are that kind of signaling molecules which gives the directions for the cells what they should do. These signals can be chemical, they can be molecular, they can be mechanical, or even electrical. And there is a lot of things for us to learn and to do more research. How we can use these external signals to give the idea for the cells what they should come for. So now that we have these components, how to do the actual engineering? Well, luckily, we don't have to travel to Moon or even Mars to figure that out. The blueprint for engineering is here inside of our own body. We all are living blueprints for engineering. Mother Nature is doing it perfectly. We just have to learn how our tissues and organs are developing. And so now we have these things. What is next what we need? Well, actually, this is not all we need. Tissue engineering is more complicated. And also something what we can learn is from animal models. As you know, many of the animal models have much better capability to renew themselves than we human has. As an example, for example, certain lizards like salamander have this huge capability to build a totally new hand, not a totally new tail or even limb after injury. And researchers have been puzzling how and why this is happening and why we humans don't have this. But maybe in future we learn this as well, because we have these new enabling technologies, like next generation sequencing we are celebrating today. So with these enabling technologies, we can do something in tissue engineering. As one recent breakthrough with enabling technologies, let me introduce the 3D bioprinting. As you know, 3D printing is that kind of manufacturing method which can be used to layer by layer production of different kind of materials. 3D bioprinting is a form of the 3D printing which combines this living component, these cells. If you would like to tissue engineer and do the 3D printing and produce some tissue or even complex organ, we need first digital design of the tissue we wish to print. Then we need these cells. Cells usually mixed of different kind of cells. Let's say that we would be liking to print, for example, cardiac muscle. We would need different kind of heart cells, we would need nerve cells, and then cells which produce living and working blood circulation inside the developing organ. Then we need functional bioinks. Those are those structural biomaterial components needed as a support for tissue development. And those functional bioinks can also include the signaling molecules, which further drive the development of the tissue. Then we need the printing equipment as such. And this technology area is developing really fast at the moment. And there is a lot of different kind of technologies currently under development. With the printing technology, we can produce the tissue layer by layer. And with that, we can locate the cells in certain position and inside the certain structure. After that, we need the fourth dimension, and that's time. We have to give time for the cells to do the actual tissue formation and the maturation of the tissue. We have to provide environment where this can happen, like bioreactors are developed a lot. And this is current one of the bottlenecks, how to get the tissue maturation ongoing in vitro before we even imagine to transplant these tissues or even complex organs for humans. And this is something we have to put more effort in research, how to do that and how to support the tissue maturation. Despite this technology is still quite immature, there is a lot of hope. And one hope is that this technology could offer human tissues or even organs for drug discovery and toxicology to test safety and efficacy of new drugs, new medicines, new chemicals. Currently, 90% of the drugs are failing during the drug development process, and that's mainly due to the fact that those are tested with animal models. It has been estimated that if human tissues or organs would be used, a lot of time and money would be saved, and the success rate of new medicine development would increase significantly. Also, we would be able to reduce significantly the animal use in this area. In the end, of course, we expect that one day we would be able to use these technologies to produce the living spare parts for human and to cover the current unmet clinical need. Let me share shortly our vision. Our vision is to use human stem cells and produce cornea transplants for patients suffering from cornea blindness. In Europe alone, 40,000 patients are waiting for cornea transplant from cadaveric donors. We have been developing methods to produce different types of corneal cells from human stem cells. And in combination with functional and innovative bioinks and with 3D bioprinting method, we aim to produce these fully thickness cornea transplant for patients in need. Stem cell therapy and tissue engineering in ophthalmology is one of the leading areas in regenerative medicines. And this is due to the many advantages we have. The easy access of the eye and the high-tech surgical and imaging technologies we have already available in ophthalmology. Thus, we do believe that one day it is possible to provide new cornea transplants for patients suffering from cornea blindness. Do we know everything? Do we have everything ready? No. More questions we ask, more we wonder, and more we realize how much there is left to learn. And we need collaboration, we need shared effort, we need common goal. Successful tissue engineering demands all these different players to work together with the common goal. We need cell biologists, we need functional biomaterials, clinicians, we need different kind of engineering disciplines, 3D imaging, 3D modeling, microfabrication, mechanical and electrical engineering, automation, manufacturing technologies, and many more. And also importantly, globally, we need regulatory processes which guarantee the safety and efficacy of these novel treatments for the patients. And we also need innovative business models, because that only enables the long-term research and development of this kind of advanced cell therapy products. The traditional pharma business models cannot be applied in this area. And last but not least, we need a vision. We have to believe that one day this is possible. Only with the vision we can start to changing the world. Only with the vision we can start to build better lives for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Right, Heli, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
A few questions, sadly not many from the audience so far, but I'm sure they'll get on board soon enough. You say that you don't yet know everything, but development, from what little I understand, is one of the thorniest problems in all of biology. And just a sense for how far you think, how far away you think some of these are, or what the near-term goals are that kind of get you towards the ultimate make any part you like.
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, we are in different phases depending on what kind of field and what kind of therapy area we are considering. With some of them we are closer, and of course some are far in future. For example, cornea is a good example. From tissue engineering perspective, it's very easy tissue to target with tissue engineering. It doesn't have blood circulation, we don't need that component. It doesn't have nerves, we don't need that component either. Nerves will come in when we transplant the cornea. So that's kind of example where we are closer to the clinical application already. But then, of course, if we consider more complicated tissues and organs like kidneys, it will take time before we would be able to use, for example, 3D bioprinting to really build full and functional kidney tissue for the patients.
Right, and sometimes the most transformative technologies end up being the most sort of worrisome for the general public, in particular when it has to do with human medicine and the like. How do you imagine keeping the public on board as you do things that might seem like science fiction to them now, that seem like messing with nature?
Yeah, I think the active dialogue with public people, it's very important. We researchers, we need to openly discuss what we are doing and share all the results we are getting. It's also, of course, important that researchers share their results to each other. Open science is important in this area as well. But at the same time, it's also important to be sharing the ideas and the things what we are doing with public, and of course discuss as well. And in this area, we are talking about human well-being, human health. It's a very sensitive issue, especially for patients. So of course it's also important that they are involved in the dialogue and discussion as well.
Right. And inevitably, and I feel like this is going to keep coming up, this will become another issue about regulation. And in fact, regulation has, on matters such as this, has kind of always lagged the most transformative technology. How do you think, how best to keep them working in synchrony as these things progress, since we have still some way to go?
Yeah, dialogue there is also very important. The regulators don't know this. Either do the researchers. So together we have to build the good and workable regulation in this area as well. So dialogue there is very important. And especially here, I think, because we have to make sure that those regulations are kind of global as well, because really we are talking about something which can be risky for patients. So we have to guarantee that all of these kind of new therapies are safe, and then of course hopefully efficacy as well for the patients. If something goes wrong, it puts roadblocks for each of us. So it's really a common goal that everything goes fine, and we have that kind of regulation, which is giving us also the pathway how we should test our products before we even test them for patients.
Right. And it's interesting that there's this overlap with 3D printing and so on. There's the sense of a great many newish technologies kind of adding up with 3D printing and IP stem cells and so on. What lessons have you kind of taken from the degree to which new technologies are kind of a sum of other equally new or not so old technologies?
Well, that's something, for example, what we have been putting a lot of effort in Tampere University. From the beginning, when we started to do the stem cell research and tissue engineering research there, we had to share common goal with engineers and cell biologists and with clinicians as well. It took time for us, for instance, to start to be able to communicate with each other, to build this common goal. But it's highly important because, no player can do this alone. We need all these different disciplines and collaboration and dream of what could be the technologies in future in this area as well. So that's highly important.
Well, and extremely multidisciplinary. The last slide was blinding with all of the things that sort of need to line up. What do you think the roadblocks are there for disciplines that aren't used to working with one another?
Well, of course, for example, to print the manufacturing technologies, of course, we are now learning vaccination technologies and things like that, but really to produce high amounts of living tissues, for instance, that's a really big aim for all of us. So to bring this kind of industrial scale production methods to produce something living and to be able to provide enough quality controls and things like that inside of the process, it's highly demanding job. But I think there also the shared ideas and joint collaboration and efforts is really needed.
Right. I think all that's left is for me to say the very best of luck.
Thank you. We will need that.
Thanks very much. And please, again, as the others, please stick around for the roundtable session that is yet to come.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Next up is Pekka Lundmark, who is the Chief Executive of Nokia Corporation, and importantly, he has been involved in the Millennium Technology Prize since the very start, since the very first one in 2004. So thank you, Pekka, for keeping up the trend and for joining us here today. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be able to speak with you today. It's always an honor to be part of the Millennium Technology Prize. Innovation, excellence, collaborating to build a better world. These are values that we at Nokia share, and that last one is critical. If we are to solve the biggest challenges the world faces, from climate change to building stronger economies and more inclusive societies, then collaboration is key. And that's what we want to do at Nokia. We create the technology that helps the world act together. That is our new purpose as an organization. So we are enablers. It could be small, but essential for the world's smartphones, laptops, tablets, and devices to function, like the audio and video coding that is enabling you to watch this event. Or it could be big, like helping put a man on the moon, or more accurately, put the first woman and another man on the moon. As you can see here, NASA has selected Nokia to build the first ever cellular network on the moon. A low-power, space-ready LTE communication system on the lunar surface. This system will enable remote control of lunar rovers, real-time navigation, and streaming of high-definition video. And when astronauts return to the surface, the aim is to have wireless connectivity like we do on Earth to share telemetry and biometric data with mission control. NASA's ambition is to use that lunar presence to launch expeditions from the moon to Mars by the end of this decade. I was 5 years old when Neil Armstrong made one giant leap for mankind. To think Nokia will play a small part in sending the next group of people to the moon, well, that's pretty cool. It also reminds me of the story about President Kennedy's visit to NASA during the space race. Mr. Kennedy stopped to talk to a janitor and asked the man what he did there. The janitor replied, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." Now, whether that story is true or not, it does demonstrate that thinking big starts with small acts. Each of us playing our part towards a common goal. The 4G age has often been the search for a killer app. But the 5G age, which has only just started, is about bringing together the world's people, machines, and devices, using our collective intelligence to solve the big problems. 5G is the technology that enables collective intelligence on a global scale. The 5G-enabled critical networks we create together with our customers help leverage the cumulative power of millions of small acts. And if the pandemic has shown us one thing, it's that we need to work together on a global scale to solve global challenges. So let's look at 3 big challenges the world faces and the potential of small acts to make a difference. How do we feed a growing global population? How do we transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy? And how do we build a safer world? Let's take the first one. How do we feed a growing population and without destroying our planet? The global population is projected to reach 10 billion by 2050. Already the UN estimates that 10% of our current global population, over 820 million people, go hungry. It's not only a question of increasing supply. 1/3 of the food we produce each year is lost or wasted, some 1.3 billion tons of food. And we can't simply clear more farmland and use more pesticides. We need to feed more people more sustainably. One of the ways we do that is by increasing the efficiency of our food production through smart agriculture. One element of that is precision farming. Using technology such as wireless remote monitoring, private networks, digital sensors, and AI-based analytics to minimize pesticide, fertilizer, and water usage and maximize yields. Nokia's Bell Labs Consulting estimates that if 15 to 25% of all farms adopted precision farming by 2030, it would lead to an increase in yields of up to 300 million tons each year, a reduction in farming costs of up to $100 billion, and reduced water use by up to 150 billion cubic meters annually. Small steps on global scale, but considering food systems are currently responsible for 20 to 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 70% of biodiversity loss, smart agriculture could kickstart the digital transformation of the entire food industry. A good example of that in effect is our work with the Vodafone Foundation in India. Over 400 sensors have been deployed in over 100,000 hectares of farmland to collect data points, which are analyzed by a cloud-based and localized smart agriculture app. This real-time information assists farmers with better crop management on everything from irrigation to pesticide control to changing weather patterns. In this pilot project, our worldwide IoT network grid solution, or WING for short, has helped 50,000 Indian farmers improve resource efficiency, achieve higher yields, and grow high-quality soy and cotton crops. Another agricultural innovation is blockchain food traceability. I'm sure you have all heard of blockchains when it comes to things like cryptocurrencies. But as you can see here on this slide, blockchains can also be used to monitor information about food moving through the supply chain, making it impossible for the data to be manipulated. As a result, farmers, manufacturers, and retailers can justify premiums for certain products, and consumers can be more confident about the source and quality of their food. If half of the world's supply chains were tracked by blockchain, food loss could be reduced by 10 to 30 million tons a year, according to the World Economic Forum. That may only be 1 to 2% of total annual food loss, but on a global scale, that would give us the capacity to feed millions more people from the food we produce right now. Small acts, big difference. Let's look now at the energy revolution currently underway, a subject close to my heart as it is a sector I used to work in. We are moving from the age of fossil fuels into the age of renewables. As this slide shows, clean power like solar and wind is now part of the global energy mix, while the proportion of coal use is decreasing. This means power grids that were designed for centralized power plant generation need to be able to deal with an array of different energy sources and weather-dependent renewables that require storage. To ensure the lights stay on when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, we need smart power grids that can manage that complexity. That will require greater digitalization and automation. One of the things they need to be able to handle is two-way energy flow as consumers and businesses increasingly microgenerate their own power. Virtual power plants, as shown here, will support traditional bulk generation in the energy networks of the future. They turn microgeneration into a networked source of reliable power. The real challenge for energy companies is figuring out how to seamlessly match supply and demand in a massively distributed system. Of course, energy generation is only one part of the equation. Improving energy efficiency is also key. Nokia recently pledged to cut emissions by 50% from our own operations and products in use by 2030. Increasing 5G rollouts will play a part as our research indicates that 5G can be up to 90% more energy efficient than existing 4G networks. Another way is through innovations like liquid-cooled 5G base station sites, which use around a third less energy and can reduce CO2 emissions by up to 80% per base station. These are just a couple of examples of how we are trying to make our own products more energy efficient, but there are many other ways we are supporting our customers to cut energy waste through the digitalization and automation of their operations. Increasingly, the critical networks we create are driven by three factors: efficiency, doing more with less; productivity, doing more with the same; and safety, keeping people, property, and the environment out of harm's way. This brings me to the third and final topic I want to talk about: building a safer world. Starting with our workplaces and roads. Thankfully, we live in an age where for many workers, the biggest hazard is keyboard-related. But we should not forget that many jobs in critical industries come with risks. Take mining, for example. It remains one of the most dangerous industries even in developed nations. But things are changing. This is the mining industry's first autonomous haulage system running on a private wireless LTE network. It has a zero-harm safety record and can operate in a range of different mining environments. More than half of Komatsu's production sites around the world are now running these automated vehicles on Nokia's industrial-grade private wireless technology. A full truck fleet can be monitored by a single controller and can be operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The mining industry has been relatively conservative in adopting new technologies, but it is making up for lost time with an accelerated digital transformation, from IoT sensors to analytics, machine learning and AI, to achieve full automation from pit to port. This is dramatically changing the industry and helping it to become safer, more productive, more efficient, and less environmentally damaging. Nokia has already created private networks at over 40 mines across the world. In fact, our experience working in those harsh environments is helping us to create the communication networks for NASA on the moon. Another good example of the potential of 5G and private networking is to improve safety in ports. In one instance, we saw remote-controlled cranes doubling productivity and eliminating staff injuries altogether. The future of industrial mobility could look a lot like this. Autonomous ships docking at ports, remote-controlled unloading of cargo, platoons of automated guided vehicles carrying it away, and then automated unloading at warehouses. Seamless, safer, faster and more efficient. Now I know some of you will be thinking, do safer workplaces mean fewer jobs? Not necessarily. We believe technology can expand the number and types of physical roles workers can perform safely in a range of industries, from logistics and transportation to construction and mining. For example, a miner will be able to use robots and exoskeletons to accomplish physical tasks beyond any human's capacity while remaining completely protected from hazards and exposure to toxic substances. At the same time, AI and machine learning will change the nature of cognitive roles. It does not need to be a case of robots replacing humans, but of assisting us and augmenting our skills so we can achieve more. We will see the rise of a new class of jobs handled by workers that blend human and machine skills and deliver a higher cognitive and physical performance. We expect that 70% of all jobs will be reliant on a blend of human and machine skills by 2030. And I'm delighted we have a robotics professor on our forum today, and I look forward to hearing her thoughts on this fascinating subject. We need to remember that technology only gives us the tools to build a better world. It is up to us to make the right decisions. A clear example of that is when a groundbreaking technological innovation comes along with the potential to save lives on an enormous scale. An invention like the human seatbelt. Since the three-point seatbelt was introduced by Volvo in 1959, it is estimated to have saved more than 1 million lives globally and reduced serious injuries for millions more. But it took legislation and education before we realized the potential of that technology to save lives. Now we are entering a new age for road transport with new technology that could eventually deliver accident-free driving. Cars connected to each other and their surroundings through 5G and edge cloud computing. Vehicles able to exchange information in real time and send warnings to avoid collisions. And we are not talking about everyone going out and buying a top-of-the-range new car. Thanks to AI and distributed edge clouds, we could retrofit existing vehicles fairly simply and cheaply to make our roads safer. We have already demonstrated the road safety potential of Nokia's multi-access edge computing in real urban settings in Spain, Germany, Austria, and Italy. Eventually, fully electric cars will be fully automated and integrated into smart transit systems alongside public transport and pedestrians. More than 1.3 million people die on the roads globally each year, and more than 90% of fatal car accidents are caused by human error. It will take legislation, education, and public dialogue before we can fully use these new technologies to make driving safer. But the destination of travel is clear. There is one global challenge that I have mentioned that is connected to all three. Climate change is perhaps the biggest challenge humanity faces after this pandemic. We can't all move to the moon. This planet is all we have. It is going to take many small acts to make that giant leap forward on Earth. From smart agriculture and sustainable farming to clean energy and improved energy efficiency to smarter, less polluting ways of working, traveling, and living. All of the things I have spoken about and much more. We need the world to act together to solve the climate challenge. And I believe we can, and we will. Thank you.
Pekka, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating stuff and sweeping stuff, I suppose. Kind of a top-down view of the world in the way that the work that you do can change a lot of industries. But you mentioned reconfiguring energy grids, bringing blockchain to agriculture and so on. But you also mentioned the seatbelt, which even with the benefit of hindsight might strike you as kind of a crude answer to the problem, a crude technology. I just wonder what chance you think there is on these really big questions that we miss a simple solution because we're always looking for the shiniest, newest, most complex one.
Well, there are two aspects. I mean, if we think about the real big problems like climate change, we actually need fairly simple technology solution. And the reason I'm optimistic is that most of the technologies actually start to be there. And if we widen the concept to biodiversity, for example, the plastic recycling that Peter was talking about is an essential part of the thing. And many of these solutions start to be there. What we are going to need, and this is what we are missing, is not only smart regulation, but global collaboration. For example, if we really want to make sure that we, in reality, take care of the CO2 emissions in the world, we would need some kind of a global agreement on carbon pricing, a systemic, large-scale, market-based solution that would force the actors to do the right thing. The enabling technologies start to be there.
Right. And a question that came from the chat that I imagine, if it's been asked once, it must be in the minds of many people. Just briefly, how is it that introducing the blockchain reduces food waste?
Well, it is real when you create a blockchain that is able to trace the food all the way from the farm to the consumer. It creates a chain of trust where people can always trust that, hey, this is the original source. Every step in the chain can trust the previous step. They don't need to build any additional reserves. They don't need to buy anything more than they are going to need, and they will not need to throw anything away because it does not meet their requirements, because they can always trust that if something goes wrong, I can trace it all the way back to the original producer. It is a complicated concept, I agree, and it takes, of course, a lot of time to implement. But again, here, the technology platform is there, and blockchain, I do believe, is going to be a key part of the answer, but it takes time to implement, of course.
Sure, but it's about origins rather than spoilage, for example.
Well, it is about trust, and that's really what the blockchain is able to bring to that whole food chain.
Right. Now, you spoke about the sort of the nascent era of 5G and all that it will bring, and 6G is already on the horizon, and to be even more integrated into our lives than 5G promises to be. Perhaps, even integrated in one way or another with the body and so on. And yet, for example, 5G has already created lots of concern and, frankly, crazy conspiracist nonsense. I just wonder why it is you think that that technologies end up not just being a sort of untrusted in some way, but spark that kind of very specific mistrust, a sense of something evil being done. Just from a psychological point of view, where do you think that comes from?
Isn't there actually anything new in this? When you look at the history of mankind, the history of technology development, every time when there has been a step function change in technology development, including where horse carriages came, and when the first automobiles came, there were groups of people who were saying that traveling at this fantastic speed of 30 kilometers per hour will be harmful to your body. And so these skeptics have always been there. What we are going to need, of course, and this is very important, it needs to be taken seriously, and we who develop this technology and provide it to the consumers need to be as transparent as possible and in our communication, and understand the fact that there is going to be a lot of questions, and certainly there are questions about 5G. We're doing our best trying to answer them. There will be probably even more questions about 6G and everything that we're going to see in the coming years.
Right. And again, very top-down view, lots of things that perhaps the audience hasn't thought about lending themselves to, vastly networked opportunities and so on. Have you run across any industries that you don't think would benefit from digitalization in some way?
Well, my personal passion in business has been for a long time kind of the digitalization potential of traditional industries, and I'm more and more amazed when I now look at the potential when I've now been with Nokia that even in very traditional industries like mining, for example, being clearly one example, there is unbelievable productivity growth potential. So I would say that you'll be surprised that in almost all industries the potential can be can be found. Don't underestimate what
I think
technology will be able to
the
do.
data are coming for everything.
Yeah, I mean, everything will be connected. That, of course, comes with a big responsibility, and when it comes to then cybersecurity and the safety and security of networks, which needs to be taken extremely seriously. But the combined power of the new access technologies like 5G and cloud, combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then the super fast optical core networks. I mean, that's a mind-boggling combination.
Right. On that matter of security and data and how it gets around, I feel like we're going to be talking about that shortly. So once again, please do stick around for the roundtable. For now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Finally, then, I believe we will be hearing from Jamie Pike from EPFL. Yes, Jamie, you are there. Very good. I will hand over to you.
Hyvää päivää. Hello. The future of humanity heavily depends on advanced technology more so than ever, as it is evident right now. Through internet, I have a visual and audible presence in Finland, as well as in the rest of the world right now, in real time. The future of robotics is often associated with, unfortunately, dark and impersonal dystopia. My work on robotics focuses on building a better future that renders softer interactions between the machines and humans, but most importantly, between people. For robots to be soft and interactive, they need to be agile and reconfigurable. This requires a new way of thinking and designing robots. Who hasn't made a paper boat, airplane, crane, in this case, running shoes? Origami is a truly versatile design platform where a single sheet of paper can be folded into multiple forms, and 3D shapes can be recreated from a 2D surface by folding. And this is proven mathematically. Now, imagine an intelligent sheet that can self-fold into any shape it wants. And this is how I make my robots. And we call this Robogami. Classically, robots have a specific task, which defines their form and function. But for them to be truly adaptable to unknown tasks and environments, we need a paradigm shift in designing them. Instead of having a single robot that is optimized for a single task, what Robogami does is a platform which is optimized for multitasking. That means there's no one fixed shape or form, but as many shapes and forms that it's necessary to get the job done, to navigate through varying environments. So how could we create them? How are they created? The biggest scientific challenge is keeping Robogamis thin and compliant, but still functional and useful. They're composed of multiple layers of circuits, sensors, microcontrollers, and actuators. We control each folding joint to create diverse and soft motions, as you see on screen right now. Tribot is one of the examples of Robogamis. Just like origami, it is designed and built flat, but goes through a 2D to 3D morphing process, as you see on the left top corner. The purpose of this specific Robogami is to autonomously navigate different terrains by itself. So whatever the terrain comes, it will change its form. This Robogami can crawl, roll, or jump depending on the terrain type. On the dry land, it crawls. On a rougher terrain, it can roll. It is exactly the same robot, but what changes is the sequence in which the 6 onboard actuators are activated. When there is an obstacle, it can even jump over it. For this, we are storing an energy in the legs so that when it's released, it can catapult like a slingshot. And during free time, it does gymnastics. The most relevant part of these reconfigured robots is that while they are designed to multitask, they can even be customized. Just like a colony of ants, each robot can have particular tasks, and we can customize the design and components of robots without having to go back to the drawing board and change the whole structural or control architecture. And that's the beauty. This readily demonstrates sustainable robotic engineering for customizable automation. These are all the words that are completely juxtaposing each other, but it is possible. Then, let me ask you, what do you think is the most challenging environment for robots? The most challenging environment for any robot is the one with humans in it. Human motions are really complex and unpredictable because we're made out of multiple materials, multiple joints, and with a brain of its own. To have robots interact with such complex and complicated humans, they must match the movement of humans by being compliant and natural. This is an example of a Robogami developed for patients with facial palsy following a stroke. We could create a prosthetic device that would mold itself perfectly to the face, embedded with sensors capable of measuring minute muscle movements and helping them to restore the impaired facial movement. But for a more tangible example, we could apply similar Robogami technology to interact with one of the most sensitive and dexterous part of our body, our hands. What you see here is the world's smallest haptic. Let me just go back. There you go. What you see here is the world's smallest haptic robot with force feedback. Once it's popped up from a stage, it creates macro and microscopic movements. When I say microscopic, it's vibration. Macroscopic means the motion you actually see with your eyes. They replicate not only the shape, stiffness, but also the texture of a remote object on the fingertip. And then you can feel them. Using that platform, which is installed right underneath Alex's thumb right now, the haptic Robogami can be fit just under that size. When combined with the 3D gaming goggles and hand controllers, what Alex is feeling under his thumb is the different materials of the virtual objects, which we see as 3 different color spheres, but to Alex, they're sponge, rubber, and ceramic spheres. He can feel what he's looking at. On a human atlas, not only do we see the Robogami, you can use it as a joystick to move around the screen, but it also gives you varying force feedback wherever the cursor lays on. And it gives you the mechanical characteristics of a lung, ribs, and even a beating of a heart. Or it can convey a driver's emotions to the car's shape by transforming its design. What you see is a concept car with 26 of Origami robot platforms installed flush on the surface of the car. The complexity of a driver's emotions during driving can be interpreted and expressed like those motions birds make with their feathers. Well, if you drive this, the road rage need not to be verbal anymore. To bring robots closer to our body, we can use different materials in design. Made of silicone and liquid metal, this robot, on the fingertip, can recreate textures and shapes of objects that are normally just images on the screen. This is highly relevant for us today. Many of us have been using e-commerce during lockdown to buy everything from groceries to the new furniture. Imagine a world where you can touch an avocado to see how ripe it is, and whether a mattress that you're looking at is firm enough. Imagine when shopping online, not only could you choose a size and colors and then see those colors and sizes on screen, but you can also test and feel the product before you complete the order. This can be done because we can transform the digital information into a pressure profile and recreate the sense of touch on the fingertip as if you're touching an object or even a person. This tiny air bubble inflates and deflates in modulated force and frequency to recreate dimension, texture, and shape. Physically convey mechanical information of a real object. When this robotic soft skin, which is transparent, is worn on 3 fingertips, you can even decipher objects' interaction without having visual cues. So that means you can close your eyes and figure out what kind of object you're feeling without actually touching anything. When combine this with the 3D glasses, your virtual reality readily becomes a tangible reality. Robotics technology is advancing to be more personalized and intimate to adapt to our individual needs. This unique species of reconfigured robots will be the platform for developing intuitive interfaces to match the diverse needs of individuals. While this recent evolution in robotics continues to open greater opportunities in so many sectors, my passion lies with healthcare. Current technology and policies have proven that we are far from future-proofing the world from further ailments. We need solutions that adapt to the evolving needs. Therefore, the future investment should be focused on progressing intelligent healthcare throughout the lifetime of an individual, even in daily lives. The impact on a personal level influences a community, which changes the culture and eventually the world. Individual progress leads to progress in humanity. Thank you.
Right, Jamie, thank you very much indeed. I'm intrigued that you've called these robots a platform technology. The things that have become platform technologies that I wouldn't have expected, and a subject actually, strangely enough, close to my heart about the use of origami in science in a more general sense. What I think a lot of people out there might not have expected is that what you've got here are called robots. So at its most basic, how would you define a robot?
Well, I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but to me and to my group and research group, we define our robotic system to be robots because they can process the information it gets from its sensory information, sensory input from the world. And once not only understands the world through the sensory readings, but it also processes it and then moves. It has dynamic motion, it creates work around it. So to me, anything that understands the world, processes it, and creates motion and creates work, it's a robot. Also, what's important to understand is it's not as instantaneous information that it gets continuous information and updates its motion depending on the changing environment. And to us, it's a robot. Not necessarily because it looks like a robot, but because it's able to do these 3 things.
Right. Fair enough. And the presentation was made up of a mix, if you like, of what you could call therapeutic applications and more mass market applications. Where do you think there's the most room to move in terms of innovation here? Because it's a platform technology that could go anywhere.
That's correct. I don't think they're independent of each other. For a platform technology to be applied for different applications, definitely we cannot overlook at how they are going to be distributed. So one of the key aspects of my research is how do you make robots more diversified in terms of their application? And that sort of leads to how they could be customized for a specific application and sectors, but also that involves humans. Involving technology around human is a very difficult task because, first of all, the humans, we have to learn how to use it. But if I were to take an example with our latest technology that's most advanced that we carry on every day, it's our computers and cell phones. And when was the last time you read a manual of your cell phone? Probably never. The reason is so intuitive to use it. Same type of analogy does not really work for robots that actually creates a mechanical force and physical force because there's always a safety issue that's involved. So when you're talking about the therapeutic robots that needs to be completely customized for the personal use, first we have to go through this process of making a very much of an intuitive interface that needs to be tested out. And in order for it to be tested out, it needs to be mass produced first. but it's to create a personalized robot that's mass-produced. It has been a complete oxymoron. Well, that's a oxymoron requires two words, but mass-produced customizable robot is it has not been something that's been possible. But I hope that my technology or my efforts in producing this type of robots will lead to having that type of accessible technology for masses.
Well, exactly. What about this and the way that you're going about it makes it so accessible?
So that's one of the platform of creating 3D robots from a 2D platform. That makes it so powerful. If I were to give you an example, if you were to buy a pack of paper for your printer, you rarely have paper that's completely out of size, so that if it were to be out of size, it will always get stuck in your printer. That means that pack of the paper is very highly precisely manufactured. They don't cost thousands of dollars. They're a couple of bucks. The reason is however, if you were to have a three-dimensional machines or objects, how about a Tupperware? Tupperware, that's really, really cheap. After it goes through a dishwasher, once it gets completely out of shape and the lid does not fit into the bottom container anymore. 3D objects are a lot more difficult to produce and manufacture and assemble, for that matter, than 2D objects. So if you could make a robotic system in a 2D manufacturing lane, you can drastically reduce overall cost. And that allows us to customize as well. So one of the things that I haven't shown in the slide is that because we're basing our design, getting inspired by the origami design, we are able to manufacture these origami robots in completely two-dimensional conveyor belt type of fashion. And any type of design modification can be implemented autonomously. That means you have push a button, you can create a diverse type of robots that is customized for not only for the task, but also for the environment.
Right. Right. Well, that is it from me. But please do stick around. In fact, stay right where you are, actually. If we could bring Peter back, and if I could invite Pekka and Heli to the stage here, we're going to pepper them all with some more questions. Right. Very good. So as before, please do keep the questions coming on the chat. And I think the first thing to do, just to sort of set the tone here, because I think there's a lot actually in this, in the question that was posed in the poll, if we could have a look at the results from that. The question was, what is the most significant impediment to positive societal impacts of emerging breakthrough technologies? Is it regulation? Is it inclusivity? Is it skepticism or the status quo, the inertia? And the results, oh, I love it, are evenly split between regulation and inclusivity. Right. No one's worried, well, very few people by comparison are worried about skepticism and crazy conspiracy theories. People are less worried about the status quo, the fact that people, don't like change. I'm intrigued by this. Let me ask you guys, first of all, before I ask what you make of that, what your own answer might have been. Pekka, you're just here. What would you have chosen for your answer to this?
Actually, my answer would have been the first one. If I had only been forced to choose one, I would have chosen the first one. And then affordability, access, inclusivity. But actually, I'm growingly optimistic about that when I look at how quickly the cost of technology is now coming down. We may see situations, as we discussed earlier, where the public skepticism may play a role as well.
Right. Heli, for your part, what would you have chosen? Maybe I shouldn't have shown you the results first.
Yeah. Well, definitely I would have selected the cost as well. In the tissue engineering and in regenerative medicine, it's definitely about the cost. We are talking about very highly standardized products, personalized products. Those are going to be very expensive first. But hopefully in future, we are able to scale up the manufacturing, and that way maybe the cost reduction would be more significant, and then more people would have access to these treatments. Regulation, of course, it's a hurdle, but on the other hand, I see that as a positive thing as well, because that's the only way we can guarantee the safety and efficacy of these products for the patients, and that's highly important. So.
Right. And Peter, as for you?
Yeah, it's a very good question, of course, but I would clearly say it's the regulatory hurdle. I see there more and more, the tendency in regulation to go into very much details that eventually should be left over to the industry or to the technologists to resolve. And the second, affordability is of course always related, then to the regulatory hurdles. Yeah. So if you have, the right regulation in place, then you can make sure that the solutions are actually also affordable.
Right. I suspect we'll come back. Well, actually, let's not come back to that because it ties into what you said, Haley, in the sense that you said hopefully these things will in time become more affordable. And lots of times with economies of scale and what have you, that turns out to be the case. And with certain technologies, it kind of never does. So what do you think is the biggest stop between, a novel technology that's a bit pricey that you'd like everyone to have, and one that ends up being absolutely commoditized?
Yeah, well, in the tissue engineering, of course we can dream a lot about this upscaling, industrial level production, but then again, we have to remember that now we are talking about living component. We are talking about living tissue, living cells. There is a lot of things we have to consider when we consider the scale up. So yes, it is truly possible that we are not going to be able to solve all these problems and to scale up in higher amounts so that the cost would be really low.
Right.
And that's why also global collaboration in this matter is very important, because also that kind of collaboration between academics and researchers, but especially with industries who are developing these things. So collaboration there is also very important. Maybe that way the developmental cost can be reduced a bit, and then maybe the product can be a bit cheaper that way as well.
Right. I didn't mean to go out of order there. It's just it's a question that actually came up during your talk that we didn't get a chance to come to, whether or not these are solutions that will be for the masses. But it's a matter of fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Right. And Jamie, I know this is an issue that concerns you quite a bit as well, in terms of inclusivity and accessibility and so on. But put that out of your mind for the moment. As for the poll, what might you have chosen?
Actually, I would have a very difficult time choosing between this multiple choice question, because I always like to check more than one box above.
Only one is available.
Because they're all intertwined. It depends on how the public perceives the impact of technology as important for their own community. Then the regulatory hurdles actually gets changed by the citizens' vote. I've actually when I was going to school, robotics was never an academic subject per se. It was applied science of integration of different types of domains of academic studies. And over the years, the industry sort of pushed it further, saying that, we need expertise in robotics itself, not necessarily someone who's just done some other levels of studies in materials, mechanical engineering, and chemical engineering, computer science. So this really pushes forward how the academia is not the most proactive in terms of how the community feels about the situation, but the government and the regulatory decision making is actually reflected by the overall public's opinion. So for me, what's quite important though is that when you're talking about gathering the public opinion, being inclusive is very difficult, because it's those ones who have masses, larger numbers, louder voices, higher capital gets to have a louder voice. So having that inclusivity for creating products and processes is quite important, because we are trying to make a technology that improves lives of everyone, and everyone lives in the same contemporary period right now.
Right. A question, I suppose, for whoever would most like to jump in first. I'm intrigued by the relatively small fraction of people who think that an impediment here is public buy-in or skepticism, or at the extreme end, I suppose, the conspiracism and all that. But just in a general sense of what people are willing to have in their lives, want to have in their lives. Why do we suppose the audience, and seemingly amongst yourselves as well, that that's not much of a concern for innovators?
Well, if I may start, I mean, the reason why I was optimistic about that, of course, we are all looking at this from our own vantage points, and we have quite different technologies we are dealing with this, that the cost of communications technology, cost of computing is coming down, and we are now in the pandemic, we have seen a vast, very quick adaptation of new applications, and actually the amount of data that is transported over the networks has exploded, and there is very widespread adaptation of the latest communications technologies going on at the moment. I understand fully that then there are segments where we are dealing with the human body, for example, and implanting things into the body and so on, then it's a totally different thing. So my comment was more from communications technology point of view.
Anyone else have a view on that one?
Yeah, I would agree also with what Pekka is saying. It depends a little bit on what kind of a solution you're talking about. That's why, I mean, coming from climate change and our solutions that we are bringing to the world, then the public buy-in has already been quite high. In addition to that, and I mentioned that also in my little talk, if you look at the next generations, how open they are for new technologies, how demanding they have become. If one would have asked me these questions 15, 20 years ago, then I probably would have said, I mean, differently. I would have said the public buy-in is one of the most important topics, I mean, to look at, and one of the most important impediments. But I mean, in today's environment, people are really, I mean, wanting to change, and they want novel solutions, and they're willing eventually also with, especially, I mean, in the educated markets, they're willing to pay the price for it.
Right.
Anyone else while we're on this one?
Yeah, maybe
Please.
I can. Well, I think this is not really big concern in regenerative medicine and tissue engineering, because, I mean, like I mentioned, we are talking about people's health and well-being. So it's so important. It's always an individual question. And usually people and patients are willing to even test things much before than the doctors are willing to test new treatment possibilities for them. So it's not big discussion there. When we were talking about, I mentioned these induced pluripotent stem cells, and before that innovation, we had the only source for pluripotent stem cells was human embryos. So then we had this kind of ethical questions coming along. Is it reasonable to destroy human embryo to be able to get these stem cells to be able to cure patients? But of course, I mean, here again, science provided us new solution, and now we just have to start to use it.
Right. Before we move on, anything on this one, Jamie? It's okay to say no.
I think all. Hello?
Oh, right. Okay. So there is little disagreement then about the primacy then of regulation. And as you say, Pekka, there are four very different perspectives here. I worry that sort of every question might go in four different forking directions. So let's try to bring it back together in a general sense. Regardless, platform independent, as it were, what are the considerations for regulators in terms of just enough, not too much, not stifling innovation? What do we think is the thing that would unite all of the technologies that you all have in your heads? That kind of is a guiding principle for regulators that you think is healthiest for innovation. Anyone who wants that one?
Well, I would say, I mean, first of all, keep it simple. Think long term, make it also then sustainable and predictable, and please leave it up to the industry or to the universities or development centers to find the right technology. So don't try to prescribe, keep it technology open.
I would agree with Peter. It's very important to remind both regulators and then often the politicians that are behind them that when they deal with this question of smart regulation that we all want is that politicians or regulators do not create products. Companies create products. Their job is to create the right environment so that capital gets allocated to these new innovations. There's a lot of examples, and I'm sure we have all been through those where there has been a big danger of over-regulation. Now, for example, in Europe at the moment, European Commission is preparing regulation for artificial intelligence. We are quite concerned because there are clearly signs, even though the purpose may be good and understandable, protect people and so on, but if we over-regulate, then the result is that Europe will be left behind, and that happens very, very easily.
Right.
Well, I also agree with Peter that keep it simple, it's the best way to go. And this is exactly, for example, in our field, how is it progressed? We start with simple, we start with single cell therapy approaches. Those are there in the clinics now. Then we start to dream about more complex products. And that's maybe also the easiest way from regulatory point of view. We start with simple and then we get more ambitious and then we build the regulation towards those.
Right. I mean, in a sense, there's a mix of ideas on sort of how you approach the regulators with your technology and how you want the regulators themselves to think. Is it simplicity in both directions?
I mean, often the regulators want to, they of course, everybody wants to do a good job, so they also want to do a good job. And they often, which is very understandable, they think from the consumer's point of view, then they want to protect the consumer. But the problem is that often in that protection, they actually then go too far, which means that then the whole regulation becomes an impediment. Nobody wants to invest.
Sure.
Because
precautionary principle.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, also if I may, I mean, especially also the long-term aspect, the predictability. Yeah. So that, I mean, in lots of the industries, I mean, all the 4 examples that we talked about today, we're talking about things where we think 10, 15 years ahead of us. So therefore, if you try to over-regulate and then have all the details, where eventually, from a technology point of view, not all the details have been resolved yet, one needs to think, I mean, also from a regulatory point of view, on that long term and be persistent. So not change it because there is a change in a commission or a change in a government, then the whole regulation eventually is being changed. And that is, of course, not helpful and is killing, of course, innovation.
Right.
I think having
Please.
I think keeping the vision alive and keeping the vision clear is very important. If we already have the reason regulatories exist is to actually not have to keep the public safe and the overall the impact of the potential risk of the developed technology could make not necessarily all positive impact. That is correct and that's important. But they also have to keep in mind that what's going to be impact of regulation as well. And those ones can only be answered if you only have a very clear vision. The vision can, and since no one has a really magic 8-ball, it's not easy to have a very clear vision that's sustainable. But they have to keep in mind that it needs to be updated rigorously, more so than what's done now. So you cannot have regulations that can be only updated once in a year, but it needs to be keep updated.
I mean, are you all agreed that the, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth here. Is the precautionary principle kind of taken to an extreme that is harmful to innovation in a general sense at this moment, do you think?
I see worrying signs, at least. I mentioned artificial intelligence as an example. At the same time, Europe is saying that we want to develop the European technology base and we need to take care of our competitiveness in this global competition, both against the Americans and Chinese and so on. There are now clear signs that in areas where we used to be actually one of the best in the world, now because of too ambitious regulations, we are falling behind.
Yeah, and it's important, of course, to answer that question, especially, I mean, if you work in the industry, we have a very large responsibility in making sure that the regulators understand our concerns and what contributions we can make. We as a company, we have always had a very intensive relationship with the regulators on a regional level, but also on a local level. And they like to hear our voice, because the last thing what a regulator wants to do is eventually make a mistake, and then industry is blaming, or industry cannot follow, or innovation cannot follow. So from that point of view, yes, of course, I mean, what we talk about concerning the regulators, I mean, there are clear messages, but they are very important. I mean, that these messages take place if you talk to commissioners or DGs or different people, I mean, on a regular, on the regulatory front.
Right. One of the things that has come up repeatedly today, and that has no one seems to have tackled this head on, so now I'm going to make it your responsibility, is the role of the individual, right? Another, besides the technologies that you all work with, something that divides you in a sense is it's different for presidents and CEOs and for, say, individual researchers when it comes to making change happen. We've spoken a lot today about the world that we want and how to think well about the technologies and how to keep everyone on board, not to render anyone invisible was a memorable phrase. What do you think, or rather, in what ways do you think differently about the role of the individual when it comes to striking it out on innovation?
Isn't it so that the whole thing starts from the individual? I mean, I used this is almost a cliche now when everybody is saying that the pandemic caused a big digital leap, but the consumers have shown that they are willing to change their behavior. They are willing to take into use new applications, new tools, new technologies. It has to start from the consumer. We cannot force them. I believe, Heli, it's exactly the same in that example that you used earlier, that sometimes the consumers, the individuals, are actually more eager to move than what the professionals in their field would advise them to.
Yeah, and I think, of course, many times the innovations are kind of coming from individuals as well. But of course, like in our area, it's a multidisciplinary work. We need many players. We need different kind of thinking. So it's kind of individual work, but it's also teamwork. And that's also very important to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's... agree. I mean, it needs to come, I mean, from the individual, and the individual can change the behavior of an entire society. But of course, I mean, if I would quote, I mean, Steve Jobs, I mean, then the individual didn't know that they needed to have an Apple phone. So I think, I mean, there is also a responsibility that CEOs, heads of innovation departments, top management is having in creating the right environment so that innovation can take place, and that innovation eventually brings solutions that the consumer doesn't even know that it would be possible.
I mean, this sort of touches on something I was hoping we would end up on is a matter of culture, because another idea that has come up repeatedly today and which hasn't really been sort of fleshed out is people speak about, well, we need some culture change as if it were easy, as if it were, you know, the same from one company or one country to another. The culture change is happening or not happening in different ways all over the world in different kinds of institutions. But there does seem to be a unifying feel here. Again, bouncing on what you've said about, you know, this is about what the customer wants. Is the culture change that's happening in wider society having the all of the effects that you would want them to have on innovation? It sounds as if a lot of people who have spoken today think that what the customer wants and what they want to see on their products, what they want to know about the origins of their products and so on, is a sufficient driver. It's more than it was. Is it happening enough to change the nature of innovation? Are we seeing just the beginning of something? Are we seeing the peak of it?
Well, I think due to the abundance of social media, we get to hear a lot of individual voices, and they can congregate much easier than ever before. But like I said before, I think there's a little danger there as well. Just because there's a congregation of smaller voices that used to not be highlighted, there remains the voices as well as the community who does not take advantage of this channel. And we have to be mindful that what we hear in the smaller channel is not the end of it, nor that there a lot of varieties and a lot of different needs are still remaining. That's why I think it's important to focus the level of the technology progress in the core components as well. So normally as a researcher, and when I speak to industry leaders, their question really lies on what's the killer application, and most of the focus goes toward the killer application. But at the end, when you make a killer application, what really makes up that as a product is like individual components that are optimized for that. So having a focus on those individual components to be able to nurture them to grow further allows us to actually have this spin-off products that can actually cater to larger community.
I'm actually a bit worried about the cultural side of the development, and the reason is that there seems to be now a growing divide in many societies. In a way, it's not anymore the traditional left-right political divide, but there is a divide between people who want to do these new things, and then, as you asked earlier, a question about the, I think you used the word conspiracy theory, or the people who, for various reasons, are against everything new, including new technologies. And now what we are seeing in many places is then that thanks to social media, for example, that even though these groups would be very small, they actually get a very big share of voice in the public debate, and media is often then escalating this. So the perception that the general public may be getting is that these would be huge groups who would be believing that COVID vaccines include a 5G chip that then can be used to manipulate our acts in the future, and so on. This is only one example, but this is, I think this is a growing concern. We are seeing it in politics. We are seeing it in adaptation of new technologies as well, and politicians are more and more thinking about along these lines, and more and more of them are influenced by this type of thinking, and I think this is quite worrying.
Well, please, Heli.
Yeah, what I was meaning to say, that it's also in research and in science. I mean, basic research is highly important. That brings the innovations, and it's also important to develop the technologies, whether we know exactly yet how they are going to be used in future. And also there, it's very important that we really need the long-term investments. We need long-term view how these technologies are developed, and then one day those can be used for something. If we do something what is demand like immediately, it's a total mess, because I mean the development of this kind of things takes so much time. So we really have to be open-minded when we do the basic research and develop the technologies. One day those can be used for something if we don't know it exactly now how those are used.
Sounds as if you agree, Jamie.
I couldn't agree more, because the basic research is the one that drives innovation, and like I said before, these this innovations really may not be developed for a specific application that is laying right in front of you, or who knows that the vision will take it the further down the road. But we really have to nurture this smaller, medium, large innovations keep happening, and that means it's the basic research.
What about a different sphere of culture? I'm going to sort of bang this drum for a short while longer, because I was kind of bringing up a sense of what's happening out among consumers, and how are those having effects. And Pekka, you mentioned kind of a worrying trend, whereas else at other times during the day we've heard about essentially consumers want something that has changed, companies' sort of mission statements and stated values and so on, a sort of, let's say, a positive rather than a negative trend, a kind of alignment of incentives and what have you. I'm interested to know, though, about the other direction, or a different sphere anyway, within a company, when those values seem to be changing, when that culture needs to change for one reason. We've heard this phrase multiple times today. The culture needs to change. How to change it? What are the key features? If you are an individual researcher, if you are right at the top of the food chain, how to change the culture? Where even to begin? Again, whoever wants that one.
Yeah, I think, it all starts, with collecting the ideas of involvement of the people that you have in an organization around a well-articulated purpose. And then be very consequent about what kind of people do you hire in the company, for example, if it is an innovation or if it is an administration or whatever part of the company. If you don't take that purpose as a key criteria in the selection of the people. For example, I mean, we in the company, we clearly say, look, you may have the skills and the capabilities when we are hiring people, and we're hiring quite a lot of people, but we're looking at your heart. What do you think? Do you really buy into our purpose of creating a healthier planet for the children? And if we hired, 40% of the total people that we have in a company, we hired or through acquisitions we added, to the company in the last couple of years. If you don't watch that, then of course, it's easy to say, but you will not realize as a CEO that you want to have a change in culture. It's just one aspect, that I wanted to highlight. Of course, there are multiple aspects, to it, apart, from the purpose as well. Also the values that you create in a company, you need to involve your people to create those values, and they need to fit again to the purpose and to your strategy. So it needs to be fully integrated. It's a way of working. It's not just, a nice slide that you put somewhere in front of the people and then they say, yeah, we're going to have a new culture.
To build on what Peter said, I fully agree, and especially from a CEO's perspective, first of all, it takes time, long time to change a culture in a large company, and very clearly, there's no way you can do it with PowerPoints or PowerPoint instructions. You need to, through it, your own behavior, clear and simple, convincing communication, and you need a strong and simple and understandable platform. Often these communication platforms that companies have, they are very, very complicated. There's so much stuff there that nobody remembers them. So that's why what we are in the middle of right now is a major simplification of the way how we do things. And this is why we launched this, as I said earlier in my speech, the new purpose statement, that we create technology that helps the world act together. Why? Because, of course, we are a technology company and we build networks, but we did not only want to talk about networks, we wanted to talk about what the networks can do to help the world deal with some of the biggest problems it is facing. And this is our way of answering our employees and future employees need to find a bigger meaning for what they are doing, referring to the janitor example in my speech at NASA Space Center. Then the behavioral aspect is also important, and also here we're trying to find a way to make it as simple as possible. We, instead of a lot of kind of instructions that you should do this and that and so on, we launched a 3-word essentials, how we want us to behave. Open, fearless, and empowered. Open, fearless, and empowered. And there is, by the way, this may sound simple, but there's a big difference if you have 3 words instead of 4 or 5. Open, fearless, and empowered. Everybody remembers that. Most companies have 4 or 5 values or something like that. That's too many. Now we have a purpose statement, and then the cultural platform is open, fearless, and empowered.
Like a mantra.
Yes.
I'm interested to know, Jamie, if you have views on this, how to go about culture change. If it seems like a culture within a workplace is far from where it could be, needs to be, even wants to be, how to begin?
Well,
right. So obviously I have a difference.
Carry on.
Obviously, I have a different scale of workforce at my lab. So at most, we had 25 PhD students, postdocs, scientists working with me. So I would like to just talk about the culture that I've tried to put in or culture that I'm getting adjusted to. Having multiple students who are much younger and who are very, very reactive to the latest of technology. I took an example as a cell phone, not because Nokia is here, but that's the technology that we are always using every day. So I was very resistant to going to smartphone for the longest time, but this is a generation who grew up with a different levels of closeness to technology. And my expertise is really in the hardware design of robotic systems, but with the current generation of students, it's very important to get the machine learning and the latest learning artificial intelligence back into the system. So having the culture where even in academia, where our focus is very clear from the goal and vision of the lab is very clear, the vision actually gets more crystallized in the updated information, update the constituent of the workers. And in my lab, it will be the researchers who's pushing the innovation as well. So keeping those innovations to come, keeping their creativity to be alive every day through discussions and encouragement of the project is important. And keeping that culture alive and evolving, I think that's the challenge at the moment.
Yeah, and also that kind of culture which enables you to make mistakes. Most of the innovations actually comes from mistakes. And that's something. You have to have that kind of environment which supports you, that you try, you make mistakes, and you learn from them, and then you try again. You dig up your motivation when you do it again and do it again. Of course, you need the driver, and that's the motivation, that you are really doing what you want to do. And I also think, at least in our area, it's very important that it's fine if you don't know everything. It's fine if you don't understand everything. You have to be open. You have to, and that's why you are collaborating with people who know something which you don't, and then together you can do something different.
Right. Jamie, you were saying almost as a disclaimer that you're coming from a different scale of operations. Perhaps we might be speaking about. But if we're to believe that innovations come from the individual, and janitors put people on the moon and so on, the scale almost doesn't matter. It might almost be fractal in nature. I wonder how much the culture change begins and ends with individuals in the same way. Now, of course, going up and down hierarchies and so on. Another thing that really struck me was in an earlier talk. This question, it sort of will stick with me for some time, about who or what is rendered invisible in a vision of the future. I think part of the cultural change that we might be speaking about here has to, it has a lot of facets, I suppose. But in terms of inclusivity, getting everyone on board, we've talked already about the sort of accessibility of and sort of affordability of technologies and so on. But this is a slightly different thing about people being rendered invisible in a view of the future. Do you guys have I almost want to just sort of leave you with the open question. Is that the sort of thing that you think about in your work, about how inclusivity seems to matter so much more now than it did even 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, it probably has to do, with what we talked about, a bit before, with the increased, connectivity. So as people are having all the means these days, to know what is happening on the other side of the world, it goes so extremely fast. Some of us, that started their careers, we were sending telex, to communicate, with Turkey, for example. So I think it comes hand in hand. As people have a much higher, experience through that connectivity, they also have a much higher demand in terms of inclusivity.
The technology has fantastic potential to bridge what is often called the digital divide, and the reason I'm optimistic about this one is really that when we look at, again, some of these big problems in the world, access to education, access to healthcare, for example, the new technology, including the new networking technology, will actually have a possibility to make the world much more equal, because it shortens the distance between those ones in need and those ones who are able to provide, for example, in education and healthcare. It will most likely make much more affordable education through the digital means available to big masses. In the same way, it will make more, hopefully, this is a regulation question, then also, hopefully, much more higher quality and affordable healthcare available to big masses of people who do not have that access today.
It's a matter of, I suppose, also of accessibility and not just affordability and so on.
But that accessibility we are dealing with right now. The number of people who do not have access, including broader access, is actually going down. very fast at the moment. And there is, in addition to what is going on purely based on commercial programs, there's actually a number of programs going on where we are also participating, driven by United Nations, some other NGOs with a specific goal to provide access to, for example, those farmers in India that I mentioned earlier.
Right. Just waiting to see if there were any further views on that one. One thing that has, I noticed has kind of repeatedly come up in the chat and elsewhere and on Twitter throughout the day is the sort of primacy of data in all of this. I suppose not everyone here on the stage deals sort of directly with data as their stock in trade, but it does seem to be a commonality to a lot of these discussions in terms of, I mean, it seems to have been overlooked, I suppose, in some of these discussions, matters of privacy, matters of trust, matters of ease of transference across jurisdictions, what have you. I suppose one question I'd ask you, if you have a view on it, is as far as regulation around data and how to deal with them, and in light of the after effects of GDPR and so on, how much is the way I saw it put in the chat was data is no longer the new oil, trust is the new oil, what have you. And a lot of the new innovations that we're seeing, that we're hearing about, that people are pushing for, live and die by data without really thinking about the trust end of things and so on. How much do you think the way people deal with it, the way businesses and innovators deal with the data and get the data to be regulated less or more will crimp innovation or boost it?
I mean, there will be so massive amounts of data generated by everything that we have discussed today that the networking needs and then the computational needs of this world will continue to explode. It's already growing exponentially, like 35% per year, and now actually accelerating. So this question will only increase in importance. What's going to happen is that a lot of this data will be put into what is usually called cloud. There will be new generations of cloud applications. That is actually a good thing, because that will give us a platform to manage that data more efficiently and in a more secure way. This is creating completely new opportunities for people who are providing solutions for managing data and taking care of the security. We are taking advantage of that opportunity. Operators are doing it. Many enterprise customers who are thinking about if they could put their operational data onto networks are dealing with these questions. This is going to be a fundamental part of our ability to implement the next generation applications. It is going to be about trust, and the technology development is actually enabling that, because without that trust, we will never be able to deal with these massive amounts of data that we are now generating.
I mean, perhaps, before we go on, perhaps that's the question I should be asking instead, is not about data, but about trust. I did put them both in the question, but didn't make that the focus. In a sense, everyone is working in an industry where trust matters to one degree or another, and it seems to matter more now, than it did even 5-10 years ago. Perhaps the question should be, how much do you think innovators should be taking that into account at the outset? Building that into their plans, figuring out how to protect trust and build it, rather than build the smarter algorithm or any other kind of innovation.
Well, for example, of course, in healthcare, we produce enormous amount of data, and most of that data, it's not used as good as it could be used. So, of course, and that's building on trust. If people believe that their own personal healthcare data can be used in that way, that it doesn't cause to the individual any problems. So with that trust, maybe we have a better tools in future to use the enormous amount of data we have already, and use that as a gold mine for new innovations in healthcare system as well. And that's all depending on trust, that people really believe that their individual data is dealt that way, that they can trust that it's a good way.
Mm-hmm. Any other views on trust, Peter or Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear. Yeah, without trust, I mean, we're not getting anywhere. But of course, we also need to look at the other side. I mean, until we reach, 100% of trust, I think that's a topic. Yeah, you will always have a certain minority that you cannot trust. I mean, you see it in the increased amount of cyber attacks, ransomware, etc., etc. So we need to have protection as well, and therefore I also believe that the innovation community need to think by developing new how to protect. I mean, from the beginning, at the start of the innovation, if it is, I mean, whatever, through algorithms, or if it is through patent protection, or if it is, I mean, by keeping certain information, I mean, confidential, and not spreading it out. I know it's not the ideal usage eventually, then, that you could eventually in open innovation leverage much more upon all that data that is available. But on the other hand side, I don't know, I'm a bit critical on that in terms of, yes, we need to have trust, absolutely yes, but I don't believe we will ever get to the point that we can trust everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also not just a question of ethics and the level of how much of trust can be given to one another. I'm working on wearable robots as well, and wearable robots really is a robot that interacts with you. And in order to interact with the wearer, robot needs to understand what's going on with the person who's on top of which the robot is working on. And that data, we use it freely because this person actually agreed to wear the wearable system. But it cannot get any more intelligent if you don't get to store the data. But that's another capacity. Real-time data storage with a filtered out noise, that requires innovation. How do we collect data? It requires a new type of sensors that allows it to have as accurate as possible, or not as accurate as possible, but with a certain level of security as well. So it's not just the level of questions or ethical questions or the storage questions, but also the technological advancement as well.
But that's a great example of where the sort of building the trust in, building the as part of the innovation itself, that might make the difference between, you know, something that moves 1,000 units and one that becomes the next iPhone. You know, if you have something that no one ever asks themselves, hey, isn't this, you know, very intimate data, you know, at risk in some way? I just wonder the degree to which that's brought in too late in the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as long as you can keep the option open, because currently a lot of options that we have in terms of our giving away our data or sharing our data, it's really never asked unless you're in the hospital with a paper form. And normally, even if you're giving the paper form, if you don't agree to it, you're refused of a treatment, you're refused of a service, you're refused of clicking on to the next one to get your paperwork done on your bank site. So really, currently, even though the data protection and the data is a huge importance to all of us, we pretty much do not have much of a choice. So if we do not have a clear idea where this trust issue goes in terms of our sharing our data or the data that would be in future collected, if you can't continue to have a choice as a consumer as well as an individual, I think that might be one of the ways. Of course, it's not easy to do. It requires a new type of inventions again, but I think that's one thing that can be kept asked all the time.
Right. A bit of a wild card question, just to see what I get, if I may. I'm just wondering what any of you thinks we can learn from technologies that are already out there in the world, but not yet ubiquitous, right? So we've been talking all day about real transformational stuff, potentially planet-changing stuff. So what are the technologies that are already out there a bit or reasonably widespread, but not everywhere? What lessons can innovators draw, I suppose? What do we learn from the ones that got off the ground, but not all the way around the world?
There are so many.
Well, then
there are so many.
Please.
I think there is a reason why 3D printer just took off so nicely in the past 10 years. It's not a new technology. I mean, the idea and the patent came out in late 1950s. So why did it become all of a sudden the go-to kit for your elementary school science camp? Everyone's talking about 3D printer as if it's the latest thing. Well, the reason is the network got cheaper. Everyone's got a computer now. You can share files. You can get materials for a cheaper price, and then you can build your own 3D printer, or you can buy 3D printer with a very low cost. So the technology I think the human lives and the I say this often. It's not that we don't have solution to a lot of our problems. It's the lack of the accessibility, as well as to have a choice to choose which solution you want to pick out. So one of the things that I enjoy doing with my class, my bachelor class, is to give up problems for more a public problem, where we open the door for mechanical engineers to solve more of problems of your neighbors. And the problems could be even just someone who's temporarily on the wheelchair want to pick up a key that's fallen on the street. I mean, the problem does not even require, the solution does not even require a robotic solution. If you were to give him a little garbage picker upper, that will work as well. So it's not necessarily the size is a problem and then the distance from the environment, but the understanding that you could ask, the platform where you could be asking for help, where the questions and solutions are shared. I think that type of platform in a smaller and larger scale would be quite effective.
I personally became excited about the fourth industrial revolution already 15 to 20 years ago, and I was involved in many of the early experiments where the basic theory was there, but and the technology was there, but it was too expensive. The reaction speed, so-called latency networks, was not there. Security was not there. Software was not easy enough to use, and so on and so on. So what we need typically is to get the exponential growth happening is that you need an inflection point where all of a sudden the cost of the technology and ease of deployment, and then often supported by some kind of a change in regulation, triggers then this exponential growth. But it's impossible to know in advance exactly when it comes. This is the classical innovator's dilemma.
Peter or Heli, anything that is an existing technology that's is not yet ubiquitous that gives lessons for innovators, good or bad?
Well, I think in our field, 3D printing is a good example. It has been used a lot in different industry area.
I was supposed to have one in my house where I could print out all my plastic parts that had broken. But
and now we are taking it for tissue engineering as well. So of course there's a lot of what we can learn from industry already, how it has been done there. Of course, we cannot apply everything when we are talking about living tissues and living cells and their printing. But anyhow, we can probably learn a lot, and there also the collaboration is very important.
Yeah, I would go back, to what I've said in my speech a little bit. If you talk about recycling, chemical recycling at the technologies, it's not that these technologies are not feasible. It's more about the scalability. So it's kind of, if we think about innovation, I think at an early stage of embarking on a new journey of innovating a new product or a new solution, I'm always asking people, how do you think in an early stage on your scalability? How will you ramp it up? What kind of partnerships do you need? And what we do have a lot, of course, and I've seen that in the previous companies where I worked, that innovators or in my field, chemists or engineers, and they think about the technical aspects of their innovation. And of course, they are very excited about it. But the question is then, of course, also, what's going to be your business model? So how are you going to scale it, and how are you going to scale it, scale this up, faster, and with whom? So this early thinking in terms of business models is also part of innovation. It's not just about chemists and engineers.
And again, a phrase we've heard so much today: partnerships, interdisciplinarity. Everybody being on the same page. I hope that through meetings like this one, more of that happens. Everyone's certainly talking about it. But in any case, for this session, I've run out all of your time. So thank you for the brief partnership that we enjoyed in trying to pick through some of these ideas. I was going to draw basically a bit of a summary of the session from this, but I've been too engaged by the conversation, so that I will leave to the rapporteur of the session, Kai Södergaard, who's also been helping with questions from the audience along the way, and that will be eventually published on the Technology Academy Finland website. So look for the summary that I couldn't provide you because I was paying too much attention to what you were saying. Everyone, thank you very much indeed. Now, for you watching outside, it is time to move on to the last Future Bazaar of the day. This one is a little bit different. The partner lounge is still open, and I should stress that it's also going to be open tomorrow. So if you don't get in there today at any point because things have been too engaging, then by all means dive in tomorrow. Now, at the same time as the Partner Lounge being open, it will be the grand final of the Millennium Pitching Contest 2021. These are fast-paced 3-minute pitches by doctoral candidates who were nominated by companies, universities, and research institutes. And from those, 5 finalists have been chosen from videos that were submitted in a selection round back in March. So I'd invite you to, either go to the Partner Lounges or perhaps better, tune in for the best ideas by young researchers exploring innovations for a better life. We'll see you back here in half an hour.